saying that you have a lot of media coverage and stuff like that. Just give me a quick nutshell. Okay, I did see that there's a lot of coverage on you on different type of media. What is the visions for Singapore's real estate industry for 2021?
I think we are in a very odd situation because right now, whether it's real estate, whether it's stock market investments, whether it's crypto investments, it seems that there's still a lot of money getting into investable assets, but at the same time, we know that the economy hasn't healed itself. I mean, large parts of the economy, such as tourism, aerospace industry, transportation, hotels. So many people seem to be still struggling for their livelihood, but yet, on another hand, we seem to see that real estate and stocks are getting rather hot. And in fact, certain stocks are even hotter than pre-COVID. So I think we are in a little bit of a very tenuous, a very iffy situation. I'm afraid that something might break.
The like bubble, right? We talk about things like tech bubble and
because the
stuff.
fundamentals isn't there to support. It is not a broad-based recovery at all.
Yeah, actually, I do agree what Koo has been saying, especially those who are following stock market and all that, like Tesla. Previously, actually went to like $300 over, but right now it's actually slipping down. And a lot of people are also having this thing that, what kind of basis are we talking about? Electric cars, EVs, and all that, and many other things that's happening as well. And of course, today we're not here to talk mainly about will property market collapse or will property market continue to strive. But we do see for the past few months, a lot of people has been rushing into buying residential real estate, right? Yeah, and do you know why people do that?
Part of the reason is because, I guess,
Interest
people have more time in Singapore, more time to visit the show flats.
Property shopping through show flats?
Possibly. Then you have got a strange situation that we have got more than 100,000 Malaysians stuck in Singapore because of the closure of the borders. And these are Malaysians who are working here, and because they are now forced to stay here, it has sort of pushed up the rentals of the mass market properties, including bedroom rentals in the HDB segment.
I actually kind of agree with you. Let me just share with you my personal view. So, humbly, I do own a property, right? So, actually, I do see a trend that my small little shoebox, it used to be like rented out as whole unit at about 2 over 1,000, which is about 4% rental yield. But during this lockdown period, I actually have people rushing to me and tell me that, hey, can I rent, like the one bedder as a separate one, and can I rent the master room as like a studio? And good enough, I do have 2 entrances. It's like dual key kind of concept where I actually broke it out. And right now I'm getting about 6% rental yield. Yeah, which is, I do agree that these kind of things are coming.
So oddly, if everybody were vaccinated and the pandemic worries are behind us, then the borders open.
Yeah, and it will crash, right?
It might. Yeah,
it might,
Oddly, right? So this is a little bit ironic. Because then the Malaysians will be able to return to Johor. Johor has got tens of thousands of vacant properties right now, overbuilt, nobody is using. And these Malaysians then will start to do their daily commute again, the Malaysians who are working in Singapore. Suddenly, the rental market would just give way, even though the economy by then should be trying to recover itself back to 2019 levels.
Yeah, true enough. I do agree with the things that we're sharing, but anyway, as mentioned today, we are not really talking about like will the property price drop or not, but we are thankful because of the situation. A lot of the house owners are really gaining a lot of money. So with all this kind of wealth that we're talking from all these like house owner, property owner and all that, how do we actually know how to transfer our wealth itself, okay? And right here, before we kickstart the program, for those who have just tuned in, I think right now we have a live audience about 43%. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning us to us right here to learn about wealth transfer in real estate. And meanwhile, for those who have just tuned in, what you can do is to continue to like and share our video, and you will be one of the lucky winner that might walk away with a $10 NTUC voucher, okay? So now time to Koo, where he shared with us about wealth transfer with real estate.
Thank you. It is actually summarized in chapter 23 of the book. This situation that I foresee that Singaporean families would be going through. So today, without getting things too complicated, after all, this is a Sunday evening. There's some mathematics and calculations in this presentation. I will skim through them a little bit quickly because the crux of the matter is as long as you understand this concept, you understand the need to start preparing for your wealth transfer, then that's good enough. Anything more complicated, more complex in terms of calculations, we can discuss offline. Perhaps when you email to Hui Jie, she can
forward it to you.
Yeah,
certainly.
then we can discuss separately.
Yeah, so what are we here to learn for today?
Okay. So today we will use the example of Mr. and Mrs. Lim, a typical family in Singapore, to discuss what they are planning to do with their retirement planning. And then we get an overview of Singapore's demographics in order to understand what's the impact across the island. And then we will also include, actually all mixed up in terms of order, we will try to crystal ball what's happening by the year 2030 or by the year 2040. And then after that, we look back to check on what Mr. and Mrs. Lim's options are and how they might be able to move forward to enjoy their retirement years. Okay, so here goes, rocket speed. Mr. and Mrs. Lim are 65 years old. This is an actual family that I've met 2 to 3 years ago. And they have been considering retirement. And both children are, in fact, one child has already gotten married, gotten his new HDB, moved out. Another child at that time was graduating and would expect to be moving out soon. Mr. and Mrs. Lim are considering downgrading in order to free up some cash. After all, they have put their hard-earned money over these decades into this property, and then they are getting on in age and in terms of health as well. So they are planning to downgrade to a 3-room flat from a 4-room flat in Hougang. The 4-room flat in Hougang at that time, this was about 2 to 3 years ago, was worth 390,000. So we had a discussion, we looked at their options. In fact, we had a discussion with their financial planner as well. We then looked at the numbers. Mrs. Lim, who is the main breadwinner, Mr. Lim has been working, but more on an occasional basis, odd job. Mrs. Lim had put in 170,000 of CPF money into the flat. So when they sell, if they were to sell their HDB 4-room flat, 390,000, then they would have to repay whatever was taken out of the HDB, whatever was taken out of the CPF. And on top of that, Mrs. Lim would have to top up with the unearned interest. And then they would be able to get 145K of cash. And because they are already 65, the total CPF that they have, that Mrs. Lim has now would be 245,000. 110,000 is the minimum that she have to retain in the full retirement sum scheme. And so she can withdraw another 135K. So the blue parts are in cash. But this is based on the assumption that they'll be selling their HDB flat. In that case, then what's the next challenge? Where will they live? So net cash from sales, 280,000. So their original plan was to buy a 3-room flat. But at 65 years old, they're unable to get a loan. And they're planning to retire, meaning not having any more income, meaning then applying for a loan would be definitely no. So they have 280,000 K of cash, and Mrs. Lim would have quite a substantial amount, 110,000 in the CPF, plus a little bit more from the last few years of work. So before we talk about Mr. and Mrs. Lim's options, let's look at Singapore's demographics. This is Singapore's population tree. This is a population graph, not the population tree. So on the left, 0 to 4 years old. On the right, extreme right, is anybody who is above 90 years old. And then the y-axis shows you the total number of Singaporeans and Singapore PRs. So these numbers add up together to be Singapore residents, so Singapore citizens plus Singapore PRs. So on the left-hand side, you see that the highest age band, which is around the 45 to 50-year-old mark, 45 to 49-year-old mark, the highest age band is about 300,000 strong. And this is the group that is typically called the baby boomers. Baby boomers are about 55 to 74 years old now. They grew up during the nation building years. The home ownership narrative was very strong during then when Mr. LKY was building up Singapore. We were all encouraged to participate in the home ownership scheme. And HDB was building quite a lot in the 1970s and 1980s, and a lot of our parents, our grandparents, they were all having comfortable housing over their heads, and they could then focus on making a livelihood, getting the children well educated. So that was then. Home ownership within this age group is likely to be close to 100%, of course, except for the very low income families or families who have fallen onto hard times. And because their salaries at that time started low, many of them, in fact, had almost 100% of their reserves in their homes. So the homes make up the bulk of their net worth. They do not have big investment accounts. They do not also have a lot of CPF money, because a lot of their CPF was used to pay for the home, and they failed to accumulate the 2.5% per annum from their ordinary accounts. Many of them are now approaching retirement, or they are already in retirement, because the top of this baby boomer group is 70 to 74 years old. They are mainly retired, again, except for the lower income ones who still have to eke out a living. Think about where this group might be in the next 20 years, the entire baby boomer group. Some of them would, of course, have gone into the 90s age range. Some of them would be at about 75, 80 years old. Looking at the largest cohort, which is now at 55 to 59 years of age, we see that many of them are in fact celebrating their 65th birthday, 60th birthday every year from now. For the next 40 years, we will be having about 30,000 celebrating their 65th birthday every year. So, how many of them have actually planned their wealth transfer? Because a lot of them have their wealth in their properties. And the bulk of them actually in HDB flats, not private properties. And just a reference benchmark for the question that I asked there, what's the life expectancy in Singapore? Right now, our life expectancy is about 85 years of age. The ladies having 2 more years than the gentlemen. So gentlemen about 83 to 84 years, ladies about 85 to 86 years. So life expectancy in Singapore is about 85. So when you're planning for your retirement at 65 years old, you have got to prepare sufficient cash to live another 20 years. And that's why we ought to maintain good health. That's a side note. So what are the types of homes that they will have to be considering for the wealth transfer? If you are in private properties, landed and non-landed private properties, restrictions on the wealth transfer may be a little bit less than if you were in HDB. But we know that Singapore as a nation, 80% of our households are in HDB flats. And HDB flats have got restrictions on transfers, because what's the likelihood that a senior citizen having passed on wishes to transfer his HDB flat to his 2 or 3 children, and his 2 or 3 children are also HDB owners? Are they allowed to own the HDB that he transfers to them? So because of that restriction, advanced planning is always a good thing to do, rather than having to only letting your family decide on what is going to happen upon your demise. So HDB flats being a restricted category in terms of ownership as well as transfers, if your children are not Singaporeans, they are not allowed to, if they were PRs, yeah, of course they can still own one HDB. Some of the children might also have moved overseas and taken on other citizenship. So the HDB flat may not be transferable to the children. So what we are engaged with clients who are a little bit more senior in age, we are having discussions with them to consider various things during the wealth transfer process. When your children inherit it, subsequently after inheriting the property, when they sell, would they have to consider a seller stamp duty if they were to sell it within 3 years? Is your property right now encumbered by the bank because there's still a mortgage on the property? Do you want to transfer the wealth only, transfer your real estate together with the loan only upon your demise? So a lot of different issues, and each family's wealth transfer needs are all different, as well as their retirement cash flow needs, they are all different. So many issues to consider. But we have sort of summarized it down to, let's go through the 5 Ws, and we create a questionnaire that systematically go through all the 5 Ws in order to get the families to think through the process of wealth transfer. So we start with first W, why? Why do you need or want to bequeath the inheritance as a property? Would you like to, while you are still alive, sell the property first, you encash it such that you are bequeathing cash? Why do you need to hold on to the real estate? Is it because you need to live in it? Are you able to find alternative accommodations, just like Mr. and Mrs. Lim thinking about encashing it and then moving to a smaller HDB flat? Why do you need to consider these steps early? Have you created a will? Given the rise in the number of people with dementia as well as mental challenges, would you have done up a lasting power of attorney to pass on the instructions to your family ahead of time before you are unable to make decisions anymore? Second W, what? What type of property do you have? I mean, primarily most of us have got a HDB flat, based on probability, of course. Some of us may have an additional property in addition to the HDB flat or our private residences. Our second property could be a commercial property, it could be an industrial property, it could be a shop house, could be a HDB shop too. What's the tenure of the property? Is the tenure freehold, or is it a leasehold, and is the lease depreciating fast? Who is the landlord? This question, if you do own factory space, the ultimate landlord is Jurong Town Corporation. So some of the rules about transfers and inheritance do come into play. And if it is leasehold, what's the age of the property? What's the remaining lease? What sort of depreciation is it facing in terms of its lease, the remaining lease? Third W, who? Who would you bequeath the assets to? Who are you going to instruct to take over the property? Who are you going to make to be your beneficiaries after the property is sold? And then, where are your properties located? Some of us have, in fact, other than the first property, the primary residence that we have in Singapore, we may have a small unit in Iskandar, Malaysia. We may have a small investment property in Australia. Where are they located? Note them down. And where are your beneficiaries? In fact, you might want to will it to your children, but 2 of your children are still with you in Singapore. The third child may be a high-flying doctor in London who may not be here to actually have this discussion or to be able to take over the property or your assets that you are going to will to them. So then where are you currently located? Of course, not all Singaporeans are staying in Singapore full-time. Some of them are staying with their children overseas, or some of us might have a PR status in Australia or in Canada. And then the 5th W is, when would you like to do the transfer? When would you like to pass down your instructions? When would you like to draw up your will? When would you like to draw up the lasting power of attorney? While you're still mentally very sound and should be ASAP. That's my recommendation. So now, quiz time. Question 1. Which of the following is the first of the 5 Ws? I've gone through the 5 Ws just now.
Can I
Which
answer?
of the 3? You can answer, but you wouldn't have a prize.
I will get the wrong answer. WhatsApp.
Oh, so you're giving away one of the 3.
Anyway, I can't. Even if I get the correct answer, I'm not entitled for the prize, right?
Okay. I mean, we are in Geylang Serai, but I'll have to call out Geylang.
Kelong, right?
Kelong, yeah.
That's a really Kelong thing. Anyway, I just have one question before we come to the quiz here. We usually learn this thing called 5W1H. Why is there only 5W instead of 1H? Do we ask ourselves like how and have the thinking process on how do we execute this sales or transfer?
Okay, I would then suggest that the how be done together with your financial planner, or it could be done together with your estate planner, or maybe if you have somebody who is helping you to write the will, that person together with your financial advisor.
Yeah.
Because many of us have insurance, and these financial advisors who sold us the insurance, they are also pretty well educated in terms of the wealth transfer process. Engage them in a conversation and then decide on how to do the retirement planning, as well as what is good time for all these transfers to take place.
True enough, I do agree actually. This is the time that we really see how well a financial planner are skilled, right? Because a lot of times people will feel that insurance agents are usually just there to sell and sell and sell.
No, they are not. Yeah, in fact,
Yeah.
I would say that our insurance agents in Singapore have actually become a lot more qualified and all-rounded now in terms of investment products, in terms of wealth planning. And actually having an external party advise you removes a lot of the emotional considerations, so that that person being objective looking at you, and that person having experience in looking at many other families' considerations, you might be able to get a lot more inputs rather than let's keep it to ourselves and let's discuss it amongst our own family members, because then you are siloed in and you are unable to look out of your own situation.
Agree, and you can't get like a third-party opinion and point of view, right?
Yeah.
And despite all these financial consultants are mainly providing a free service until you engage them, isn't it?
Correct. At least bounce off your ideas.
Yes.
Explain your constraints. Let somebody who can be emotionally more detached help you to determine what are the various options and paths, which is what is in this presentation. I discussed Mr. and Mrs. Lim's case in order to put more ideas into you. But of course, Mr. and Mrs. Lim is a typical retiree couple in a 4-room HDB. Everybody's family situation would be different from Mr. and Mrs. Lim. In one